And pleased to be joined by noted entrepreneur and investor Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary, pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, so give us the background here on VeeCon, and obviously that's where you are in Indianapolis right now, and the importance of this type of event for so many people right now.
I think, I have a pretty prolific public speaking career here over the last 15 years. So I've been to, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conferences around the world, and kind of always wanted to have one. When we innovated the VFriends project, we wanted to use the smart contracts and NFTs. So we provided 3 tickets when you minted the NFT 2 years ago to 3 business super conferences that we wanted to throw once a year. This is year 2 in Indy. Last year we did it in Indianapolis. This year we're doing it at Lucas Oil Stadium, where the Colts play. And what's really fun for the audience that I know you have is, look, it's the most contemporary, kind of cool contemporary business marketing entrepreneur conference is the ambition in mind. I was very affected by South by Southwest back in the mid 2000s. And so that kind of conference mixed in with some of the other events that I've been through in years has been an ambition. And so whether it's pop culture or innovation, whether it's the CEO of LVMH North America or Scooter Braun, who's done it in music, or Dave Grutman, who's done it in nightlife, or Jessica Alba, who's done it from Hollywood, then into consumer packaged goods, and many, 125 plus other speakers. We're just looking to blow people away with the magnitude of the content, and then really focus on the community we've built. And really, one of the things I've always loved about great conferences is the people you meet in the halls, the chats you have when the content's not going on, or even when it is going on. And so the layout is very conducive for interaction, whether you're consuming the content or not.
What do you think is kind of the state of entrepreneurship right now? And I say that obviously because the pandemic changed so much for so many people on so many different levels. And we've talked on our show about how many times businesses had to pivot in the pandemic to be able to survive. I'm wondering if you've seen some of those changes within entrepreneurship itself.
I think there's 2 extreme counterpoints that I most recognize that are happening over the last 4 years. More people than ever are now tasting entrepreneurship because the concept of a side hustle or, the microeconomy or gig economy is very real. People learned how to use the computer more, and social media more, and Zoom more. And I think a lot of people had to do things during COVID, found new passions. The economy has gotten softer. People have been laid off. People are learning skills, flipping stuff online, starting a podcast. People have gone, viral on TikTok without knowing that that was their destiny. And so more people have tasted entrepreneurship and are doing versions of it. On the flip side, another opposite thing has happened in the last 3-4 years. More people in the last 3, 4, 5 years have realized they're not capable of being an entrepreneur. If you go back and this 3, 4, 5 years ago, there was almost this concept of like anyone can do it. Like the amount of people jumping into it. There was this confusion that you being an entrepreneur meant the same thing as being a successful entrepreneur. And a lot of people were playing successful entrepreneur on Instagram, but not actually living that life. And so it's a really interesting time. More people than ever tasting versions of it. More people than I think a half decade ago coming to terms with it's okay of not being an entrepreneur. You just might be a number 3 or a number 7. And so it's an interesting time for that combo.
I think a lot of people have forgotten, and this is something that I've heard through the professors here at the Wharton School, is that people forget that the success rate on ideas as entrepreneurs is still relatively low. It's not like, you come up with an idea and it's a sure winner right out of the gate.
And this, given, the pedigree and the caliber and the relationships of the kids that are popping out of Wharton, a lot of them are in a position where they are able to raise capital against ideas. And this, and, people that pay attention know there's been more capital in the system than ever. And so the success rates are still incredibly hard, but this, when you and I were kids, small businesses would usually die within the first year because there's so much capital in the system where these companies are taking 3 to 4 years to die. And a lot of times they're doing M&As, on a penny on the dollar. So it doesn't look like it died. It looked like it got M&A. And so there's a lot of variables that go into this conversation.
You mentioned about with VeeCon the use of NFTs, and there's still a lot of conversation about where that's going to head.
Yeah.
There's obviously, like we're seeing with OpenAI and ChatGPT, there's a lot of early jumping on board, getting involved in it. It seems like with NFTs, it's maybe hitting a slow. I don't know if it's a slow patch or it's kind of hitting its normal path right now. What do you see as the pattern with NFTs?
My intuition is that I always thought that the pattern, and at the height of it, I started making these videos after being like, hey, everyone should learn about this and get involved. I started making these videos that 99% of NFT projects were going to go to zero, which wasn't landing so well with the community, except for the small percentage of the thoughtful ones. And the reason I did that was it reminded me of the hysteria of things in collectibles like Beanie Babies. But just because Beanie Babies aren't worth a fortune doesn't mean stuffed animals aren't a huge category. It reminded me of the dot-com bubble. Just because those companies were wildly overvalued because of greed didn't mean that the internet wasn't going to be a thing. So I think it's going to be in between what it is right now and what it was 24 months ago in the hysteria. Because right now, people are scared to innovate in it because there's not a lot of clarity. Not to mention, there's not clarity yet. We're waiting for legislation, right? So I think people are kind of stuck a little bit. But the macro technology, ironically, you bring up AI. I actually think the blockchain is about to become a hero in society. When people realize what deep fake videos are and how many there will be in the system in 3 years, and how we will rely on decentralized servers to prove provenance, and that we will all interact with the blockchain to make sure the video that we just saw of a public leader or a famous person, what they said, we today, every one of us, default into when we see a video to believe it to be true. Within the next decade, it will be the reverse. There will be more fake videos of people saying things than real videos of people saying things. So we will have to reverse, and we will need the blockchain or some combination of new technology that I don't understand or hasn't been invented to create affirmation. And so I have a hunch that the blockchain is going to go there. And I think NFTs, again, are stuffed animals, not Beanie Babies. And I think just like sports cards, 99% of them won't be valuable from a collecting lens, but Michael Jordan and Wayne Gretzky rookie cards are. And then there's the whole smart contract of it all, right? Title insurance, signing a deal, like literally actual contracts. A lot of those things are going to be in non-fungible token form. So right now we talk about NFTs as a collectible. The world does. But we used to talk about the internet from a place of it just being about information. Remember the information superhighway? The internet is much more than just information. NFTs are much more than just a collectible. So I think over the next decade that will play out.
Well, and the thing about blockchain is it's been so associated with cryptocurrency that I think people forget that it's so much more than just that. And obviously, with some of the negative things that have gone on with cryptocurrency in the first few years, I think it's been associated to the downside with that. Blockchain seemingly has so many more options, it feels like, moving forward, that we really haven't even kind of dug deep into at this point.
This is why when people like to razz Bill Gates for underestimating the internet, what he was doing in that micro moment was he was only looking at it from the lens of like, this is good for academia and government to get information. He hadn't played out all the other use cases. And as soon as he did, he went full throttle. I think what you're touching on is exactly right. But it's also a branding game. This greed and all this effects, it's going to take a half a decade to shed some of that bad taste, right? The media is going to run with it for a while. And so that will evolve. But like, look, when you're running a marathon versus 100-yard dash, you're not devastated if you're falling behind in the first leg. It's a long race.
What's the advice you give to entrepreneurs, the best advice you give to entrepreneurs right now?
Me personally, my favorite is accountability and patience. I'm shocked how many entrepreneurs want to buy a boat next year with their big business. And I'm shocked by how many entrepreneurs, when they are fully in control of their business, like to blame everybody around them besides themselves. I think the best way to be a happy entrepreneur is to be 100% accountable and try to play the long game. Otherwise, you get too anxietied out and you get blown out of the game.
Is the landscape there for young entrepreneurs right now, or do you have to have a little bit of that life experience in you before you make that jump?
The answer is both. I mean, the opportunity is greater. You know this. Like, I mean, I don't know if my mom and I laugh all the time. I don't know if I would have graduated middle school, let alone high school and college, if I was growing up in this technology era. The opportunities are just obnoxious. On the flip side, as someone who had great success as a child and a young man in business, it was my talent. I can tell you 47-year-old Gary runs circles around 25-year-old Gary as an entrepreneur because experience matters. So, and then I think you see that in sports a lot, right? Like, unless your body starts to break down, which it does in every athlete, even the best of best players, the LeBrons, the Kobes, the Jordans, you know, or a Federer or Brady, whatever they are, they're clearly very good when they get out the gate, but you get into that 5 years later, 7 years later, 9 years later, they just know the whole game. Everything slows down. And so I think the answer is both.
What do you think the landscape is then in the world of advertising with digital? And then the next step, which I know you've talked about, is Web3 and how that's going to impact a lot of this.
You know, look, I mean, the first part of that question is we should do a 4-hour podcast on that, because I can tell you right now, I think one of the biggest elephants in the room globally, in the world, in business, is the sheer amount of money being wasted by big brands on traditional advertising. And when I say traditional, I don't mean just television, print, and outdoor. I mean traditional digital, programmatic banner ads, you know, and then you have to actually be good at social or influencer or this stuff. So, you know, I think the way technology has affected the advertising industry is profound, and we have not calibrated that on Madison Avenue yet. And I mean, you're talking about $80 billion spent on television commercials, media placement, forget about the creative, in a world where, like, I'm struggling to find the human beings that are able to consume commercials on cable and television. I'm struggling to find people that watch cable and television outside of live sports because they're all living in streaming services. And so, you know, I guess the answer to the question is we need a day of reckoning in ad land, and we need to recalibrate the way we're scoring success and measuring brand and media efficiency. And I think there's going to be a lot of carnage in the next 20 years, and a lot of big brands that we know today are going to lose profound market share, because every time somebody walks into Walmart and buys a Mr. Beast chocolate bar, that's a chocolate bar that Hershey's does not sell. Every time that somebody goes into a Target and buys a Prime Energy drink, I got bad news for Powerade. That used to be your sale. And so there's a lot going on out there, and I see Fortune 500 brands putting their head in the sand, and they're going to get run over by this tidal wave.
Well, and I'm just amazed how many secondary brands have come onto the market and had unbelievable success. You think with some of the companies that are out there that are doing golf shirts and polos and all these different companies, and they have that digital connection, and they are doing just as well as some of the big name brands these days.
It's because media has become commoditized, and so has distribution. You have to understand, in 1984, Kraft or PepsiCo or Procter & Gamble or Unilever, a small entrepreneur couldn't get their product inside of Walmart or Kmart or ShopRite, right? They couldn't get on television as a commercial. Today, you can post one TikTok and it can go viral and your product can sell out, and they all go to your Shopify store and they have it delivered to their home.
Yeah.
Awareness, marketing, and distribution, selling at stores, has been completely wiped out as something that costs tens of millions of dollars to get into, thus rendering competition being able to start taking market share from the biggest brands in the world.
Gary, great to have you with us. Enjoy your time in Indianapolis. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you, my friend. Have a great day.
Thank you. Gary Vaynerchuk joining us here on the show.